welcome everyone. My name is Dakota Hufford. I am the Communications and Program Coordinator for CRBC, and I'm also an entomologist. I'm joined by Amy Barton, our Communications and Stewardship Manager. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is the 5th of 7 webinars in our series designed to help you be a better steward of your land here in the Clackamas Basin.
All right, everyone. Next, we would like to share our land designation with you. Many of us are joining from Oregon and Washington, and I'd like to take a moment to recognize that we are gathered on the unceded lands of many Native peoples. I ask that you join us in acknowledging the many communities, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. This acknowledgement demonstrates a commitment to beginning the process of working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. We thank those who came before us for their stewardship of these lands and waters, and those who continue to steward them now and into the future.
Okay, so just quickly, our schedule looks like this. We're going to talk so quickly about CRBC, who we are, what we do. We will talk about why pesticide usage matters, and then we will briefly touch on IPM, then commonly treated plant pests and alternative treatments, and then commonly treated insect pests and alternative treatments for those, and then a space for Q&A at the end. So our goals today are that we hope you take away some ideas about alternative treatment methods for common plant pests and insect pests, as well as a basic understanding of IPM. And finally, you will leave with a list of resources on further information and other things you can do. We do want to hear from you. In an effort to conserve time, we do ask that you hold your questions to the end or just pop them into the chat and then we will address them. And additionally, like Amy said, just go ahead and keep your mic off and remember that we are recording.
All right, so here at the Clackamas River Basin Council, our mission is to foster partnerships for clean water, to improve fish and wildlife habitat, and enhance the quality of life for those who live, work, and recreate within the Clackamas River Basin. We are a 501c3 nonprofit watershed council, and for the past over 20 years, we've been invested in restoring and protecting the Clackamas River and all of its tributaries. We do this through in-stream and riparian restoration projects. That photo on the left shows our contractors installing large wood in a stream for fish habitat. We also host volunteer events and educational workshops, such as this, all free to the public. The image in the middle shows our down the river cleanup, where volunteers help us clean a 22-mile stretch of the Clackamas River. We hope to see you there. We also offer streamside residents with free weed removal and native tree and shrub planting through our Shade Our Streams program. We also help with wildfire recovery. That's that picture on the right there. All of our work is aimed at improving the Clackamas River and its tributaries, but we can't do this without people like you. So thank you.
All right, we're going to jump into it. Why pesticide usage matters. So the Clackamas River provides drinking water for over 300,000 Oregonians. That's about 10% of the state-ish. The image on the right shows the areas that get their water specifically from the Clackamas. And the Clackamas River also, of course, provides habitat for threatened and endangered salmon and steelhead and a host of other incredibly important wildlife. So thank you for being here to help protect them. So how you use chemical in your yard does matter. Of the 30 commonly detected lawn pesticides in the US, there are 17 that are detected in the groundwater, 23 that have the ability to leach into drinking water sources, 24 are toxic to fish and other aquatic organisms vital to our ecosystem, 11 are toxic to bees, and 16 are toxic to birds. There are 13 known pesticides of concern routinely found in the tributaries of the Clackamas. How do we know that? CRBC partners with ODA and DEQ to collect water samples from 5 tributaries of the Clackamas River, which are then sent to DEQ and tested for the presence of pesticides. So we know that it matters how you use chemical in your yard. That's why you're here today. But this information does serve as further reminder and call to action that our individual choices really do make the difference. So salmon and other fish are inherently impacted by the chemicals that do end up in our waterways. Salmon have a very sensitive sense of smell. Relatively low concentrations of pesticides can interfere with their ability to smell, which may affect their behavior in a number of ways. Examples include altering the ability to feed and to avoid predators, disrupting schooling behavior, and inhibiting normal migration patterns. Salmon use their smell to detect predators. They sense danger pheromones given off by other fish. And so when the salmon sense the signal, they'll tend to stop moving and take a rest, which makes them less visible. And they are also thought to use their smell to find the proper streams for spawning. So it's a very important sensory mechanism for them. Other effects on salmon from pesticides may include reduced food sources. So if it's an insecticide, then it's affecting the insects in the water, which is what the fish eat. It can disrupt their immune system. It can disrupt their nervous system and cause olfactory disorientation. And then there's the threat to reproduction. And even again, at low concentrations, certain pesticides may act as mimic or blockers of sex hormones, and this will disrupt the sexual development of the fish. Some chemicals that have been studied and are very much known to adversely affect fish and have been or are in the process of being banned or restricted are carbaryl, which is the 7 brand of pesticides that you can buy at a store, methomyl, bromoxynil, prometrin, metolachlor, can't say that one, and then the 1,3-dichloropropene. There are some brand names up there. Do reach out if you have any questions about that. Okay, so we are going to talk about IPM. This is a very broad overview on a fairly technical concept. So there's going to be some like technical terms. Again, reach out if you are interested in more information or you want to set up an IPM plan for your home. I'm happy to help direct you to resources and help you with what I know. So a note on the word pest and the language used, actually just really quick, surrounding undesirable organisms. The terms pest or weed are relative and subjective terms. They are used when an organism's in the wrong place at the wrong time. We can also appreciate the difference between a perceived household or yard pest and an invasive or noxious weed. As we discuss these steps and principles of IPM, several central questions or thoughts at the heart of integrated pest management, as well as living in congruence with nature, are whether or not your perception of a pest or weed should be reevaluated. Does the organism in question cause significant harm or damage to persons or property? What lengths are appropriate to control this organism? And is there any level of living with it that can be accomplished? So IPM, Integrated Pest Management, is an environmentally friendly, common sense approach to controlling pests in any setting. Traditional pest control involves the routine application of pesticides. IPM, in contrast, focuses on pest prevention and uses pesticides really only as needed. This provides a more effective, environmentally sensitive approach. Home IPM programs take advantage of all appropriate pest management strategies, including, at times, the judicious use of pesticides. IPM is not a single pest control method. It is a 4-tiered approach. It involves integrating multiple control methods based on the specific site and organisms that you're dealing with. So successful IPM programs will have the 4-tier approach, which are to identify pests, set action thresholds, then prevention, and finally control. There are cost savings associated with IPM. It may be more labor intensive than conventional pest control and may require more upfront resources to implement, but costs are generally lower over time because the underlying cause of the pest problem has been addressed. And so, yeah, overall IPM is an effective, economic, and environmentally sensitive approach that offers a wide variety of tools to reduce contact with pests and exposure to pesticides. The first step is to ID, like I said, identify the pest or this organism that is in question. This is important because it really helps determine the most specific preventative measures that you can get. We're trying to avoid broad spectrum and really target individual organisms. So if you need help identifying pests or any organism really, you can reach out to OSU Extension Office in Oregon City, us, CRBC, or the Soil and Water Conservation District, and we should all be able to point you in some good directions. And And then you will want to set action thresholds. So this sounds kind of technical, but it doesn't have to be. It can be as simple as you visually assess a thing, a pest on a certain host, and that becomes your threshold, some visual amount. So just setting up your action threshold is important because that will determine when to take action. Third step is prevention, and this is where the work comes in. This is a lot of those manual, cultural removal or exclusion methods. IPM focuses on prevention by removing the conditions that attract the undesirable organism, like whether it's food or water or just the habitat in general. So preventative actions are going to vary based on your situation, but some include installing barriers. I have a picture of these copper barriers here. These are really good for slugs and snails. Just a simple little copper barrier. And just overall making the habitat less desirable. This goes back to properly identifying that organism so that you know how to do that. And then sometimes the use of biologic controls, which I will talk about later on. And then finally, the fourth step is that control step. And these can oftentimes look like this, as we said, it can end up being pesticide, but it is oftentimes lots of physical removal and trapping if it is an insect pest.
Okay, so now we're going to get into it with individual pests that you might see in your yards. So we're going to start with plants. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the plant and then share some traditional chemical methods that are often used. And then I'm going to talk about some alternative herbicide-free recommendations. All right, so starting with the tough guys. These are some of the harder plants to eradicate. Japanese knotweed grows tall, can be up to 12 feet high, and it spreads in these dense clumping patches, especially it really likes being along creeks and wet areas. They have large heart-shaped leaves and kind of reddish reed-like stems, especially in the fall time, they kind of turn reddish. They do die back in the winter, but they are alive and well underground. And then we've got Italian arum. It's a kind of tough, low-growing plant that spreads quickly by seed and through vegetative tubers. Both of these plants displace native vegetation and they do harm local ecosystems. So it's important to control these weeds if you have them. Okay, so I knew that I just said that I was going to share some alternatives, but I don't have great news here for these two plants. These two plants specifically are very, very hard to eradicate with non-chemical methods. We thought it was important to share and start with these plants because sometimes we can accidentally do more harm than good when we try to eradicate certain things. So if you have these plants, we recommend that you please contact your weed control program, your local weed control program. So here in Clackamas County, that's the WeedWise program through the Clackamas Soil and Water Conservation District. If you do want to spray them, to take that on in a DIY approach, we recommend that you do that in the fall. That's when the knotweed and the arum are really going to suck down the nutrients into the root systems. And please, of course, read all those labels because we want to make sure that we're applying things safely and appropriately. So why are we saying this to you? It's because every part of these plants can become a new plant. So sometimes when you try to dig it out, any little root fragments that are left behind or a piece of that tuber on the arum can just be a new plant. So if it's stuck to your shovel or your shoes or still in the ground, or if you're next to a stream and some of that washes down, those are just new plants that are out there in the world. So that's why we're saying that about these two specific plants. All right, next we've got our vines. So you are all probably very familiar with these plants being here in the Northwest. So we've got our Himalayan blackberry there on the left, our English ivy in the middle, and then old man's beard or Clematis vitalba there on the right. Blackberry is a thread along the ground. It spreads quickly underground and through seed spread by birds. Can't say I blame them. And then clematis, is a threat to our tree canopy. It really climbs up those trees, weighs them down, shades them out. And ivy is a threat, really to both the ground and the canopy as it spreads quickly and competes with native vegetation. So we do recommend that if you have these, that you do get on top of it and try to control them. So some common chemical methods that are used are glyphosate and tricloper. Those treat many woody and broad-leafed weeds, but once it's on your blackberries, you don't want to eat them. All right. Okay, now I'm going to talk specifically about blackberry herbicide alternatives. So number one, most effective way is to dig them up. So that will work, just to get them up, get the entire root, and just get it out of the ground. It can be challenging, but one good way to do it is just to use loppers and just kind of cut it off at the ground, clear away the spiky stuff, and then really dig that root out. It is the most effective way to eradicate it. You can also try goat grazing. Not only are they adorable when they eat, but they're also very helpful. They can really knock that plant down for you. However, they can't pull the roots up, right? So you're going to need to follow up with root removal by digging that up later. You can also try to mow them, and this can be effective too. So mow, starting now, late into the spring. The plants will regrow during the summertime, but they won't flower and they won't have berries on them. So that'll help you kind of keep controlling them. And then keep in mind that once you mow them, you have to do it every 2 to 3 weeks for about 2 years. I know that seems like a lot, but it's kind of like, maintenance of your lawn. You're already doing that anyway, and that's just going to be seasonally. So you'll be doing mowing every 2 or 3 weeks from spring to fall. And after about 2 years, they don't have enough energy left to keep coming up. That can be effective if you've got a smaller space, where you can kind of use a weed whacker and whack them down. If you've got acres of it, you might need help, professional help, or a skid steer or something like that. Maybe you have a neighbor who has one. Okay, now we're going to talk about ivy herbicide alternatives. So we recommend that you cut the ivy off of trees as soon as you can. Start at chest height, cut them down. We'd recommend that you do not pull them off the tree because it can really tear the bark off. It's very tempting because you just want to get rid of it. But just leave it to dangle and it'll die, just like in the picture here. And then after that, you can pull the roots and the ground vines. And Eric Butler, who's joined us here today, taught me this, but you can pull ivy vertically up and then pull horizontally, and it works really well. They've got these almost aerial roots, so they pull up really easily. And you can even cut them if you've got a carpet of it, you can kind of use a weed whacker and cut a straight line, go 10 feet over, cut a straight line. You can kind of roll it up like a carpet almost. So. Okay, now we've got our clematis. And here it's very similar to ivy, but just slightly different. So we wanted to separate them out for you. We do recommend that you cut them at chest height and leave the vines to dangle just like ivy. But then you will need to dig out the root crown. So it's not like ivy where you can just kind of pull it. You really got to get the root crown out. And unlike ivy, which you can put in a pile and just let it compost on the ground, with this, you will need to cover that pile with a tarp because it can resprout. Okay, next we've got our garden foes. So these guys are everyone's got them. They're around. We all know our dandelions. A lot of different kinds of geranium out there, but shiny geranium is very common. And Robert geranium, also known as Herb Robert or Stinky Bob. Stinky Bob might be the shiny. Either way, thank you. Yep. Okay, either way, all these guys, very common. The geraniums, they're small and dainty and overall they're kind of cute, but they can take over gardens and forested areas, and they just produce so many seeds and they can spread very easily all over the ground, even up trees. So a good idea to get on top of the geraniums. Okay, so some common chemical treatments that people use on dandelions and geraniums, the 2,4-D, it's a common lawn chemical that treats, broadleaf weeds and doesn't really impact grass all that much. Weed and feed is also very, widely used, and we definitely recommend that you do not use that. And then pre-emergence as well, which you'll put on soil to stop things from sprouting. So those are what is used sometimes for chemicals. So some alternatives for your geranium. Hand pulling is the easiest, and start it now. So in the spring before they start to flower, or later, you can wait till fall. You want to get them before they start to make those seeds. There's a picture of them here on the right. So you can see just how there's just not much to them. Their roots are very shallow and they come up really easily. So hand pulling is by far the most effective. You can also mulch them. So maybe there's that picture there of that mulch, but bark mulch will work, or tree mulch. But if you've got about 6 inches of mulch on top of them, they really have a hard time coming up through that. So you can give that a try. Also, flame torching or flaming. So you can rent these or buy them, but it's kind of a long sort of torch that you use, and it really just doesn't catch things on fire. It just gets it really hot so that it dies. That's one thing that does work on geranium. And we recommend that you do not mow them if they're in your lawn, because they produce so many seeds that it just spreads the seeds everywhere. So you don't want to do that. But these other methods, mostly hand pulling, do work the best. Okay, so for dandelion herbicide alternatives, honestly, we recommend you just leave them be. If you can live with them in your lawn, if you can, if that's okay with you, they can be a first food for those early pollinators that emerge. This is a picture of a little bumblebee on there in this picture here. They aren't so highly invasive that they're taking over areas, but if you can handle them in your lawn, then, that's fine. And if you can't handle them, if they gotta go, hand pulling or digging them up before they flower is the second best choice. There are some really handy tools out there. So there's a picture on the bottom left there of a upright standing tool you can use. It's pretty easy just to step on it and pull them out. That can be pretty effective. Also flame torching like the geranium. So I've got a picture of it there for you to kind of show you how that works. That can be effective as well. And then mowing. If you just want to keep them mowed down, they're part of your lawn, you just mow them like you mow your lawn, that works too. That's really the best way. Okay, maintenance. So you remove them, yay! But you're not done yet, because you got to return to the area. You got to look for regrowth. So these permanent removal does take time. So there's some patience there. There's going to be seeds that have scattered, or maybe there's root pieces that were missed. Things are going to resprout. With blackberry and ivy and many of these other plants, there's seeds that are scattered by birds. You're just going to have to keep a lookout. And then make sure to always remove the dirt from your shoes and your garden tools, because you can easily accidentally spread things around just from that. And then just replant the area after. So that's a picture of CRBC staff replanting after a big blackberry removal.
Okay, we are just gonna breeze through some commonly treated insect pests and some alternative treatments. Just a quick note, the most conventional home insect treatments use pyrethroids or permethrin. This is a synthetic botanical product modeled after chemicals used produced by chrysanthemum flowers. It is broad spectrum, not species specific, and can persist in the soil for a very long time, continuing to damage other non-target organisms. So the following are all just suggestions, all suggested alternatives to pyrethroids. I'm starting with the tough guys as well. There are some insects that simply cause too much damage to not be controlled. An issue with some of these really highly invasive species of insects is that they oftentimes don't look too different from our native ones. So you really need that identification piece. And again, for help with that, reach out to an extension office, us, or the Soil and Water Conservation District. This is a very short list of the invasive insects we see in Clackamas County that do warrant calling in a sighting, which can be done through the Oregon Invasive Species Council, either through their phone hotline or an online submission. So Japanese beetle down on the bottom, these are super harmful to native flowering plants. Mediterranean oak borers are a serious threat to Oregon white oak. And the southern pink moth has not established, but they have been spotted in Clackamas County. They need a host in the mint family. So if they were to establish here, they would be able to pretty prolifically defoliate plants in the mint family, and this would be a problem for both home gardens and agricultural stuff. And then, so a quick note on ladybugs. Oregon has around 90 native species, but over 50 non-native species have been detected. And this is not in small part due to the release of ladybugs from garden centers into our home gardens. And I realize the conundrum that this creates for people because ladybugs are good garden predators and biocontrol for other pests like aphids, but we may end up doing more harm than good by purchasing these non-native species. I just recommend you check in with your source of beneficial insects, where they're sourcing them from, and you can reach out to CRBC for some other resources and recommendations there. Mosquitoes are a problem as a vector, and they're also problematic to treat because their larvae are aquatic. So if you live in Clackamas County and you notice mosquitoes on your property, call Clackamas County Vector Control. They will treat your land for free, and they oftentimes are using botanical products instead of insecticides. And that is true for most counties and municipalities. There is a vector control. Carpenter ants are also a tough one because they are native and they are only doing what their biology calls for. So the most common treatments for carpenter ants are permethrins, which again is broad spectrum, and it can be tricky, but the recommended organic treatment methods is to find the nest by following workers and apply a combination of organic treatments such as diatomaceous earth and boric acid, as well as a direct application to the nest. I will just say, you'll probably need help finding the nest. Reaching out to a company, a pest company, so they will often be helpful with that. Okay, these are the guys that I treat myself and that I recommend you can treat for yourself. Some insects are not welcome visitors in my home because they do destroy food. Sugar ants are easy to spot, and when I see them, I will treat them with bait stations instead of a broad spectrum chemical, and the bait stations allows them to just take it back to the nest source. And then pantry and meal moths are also a huge pain, and they are also easy to spot, but once you've spotted them, they've already reproduced because you're seeing the adults. So you want to, once you see a moth, go ahead and purchase some pheromone traps, and these will trap the males specifically, and then the females will not be able to reproduce. And aphids are a problem. There's a problem, there's really no way around it. Luckily, they're pretty easy to deal with. They actually they rarely climb back up a plant that they get knocked down off of. So number one thing is to spray them off with a some pressured water. And then once they're on the ground and the ground has dried, you can spread some diatomaceous earth, and that will help to cut up their soft bodies. Cabbage moths, if you've ever grown any brassicas at home, you will have seen cabbage moths and know that they're a pest to your vegetables. The recommendation is to interplant with marigolds because they attract a parasitic wasp, which specifically needs the cabbage moth caterpillar as its host. So that helps really control that population. These are the ones that I recommend folks learn to live with. Some of these don't even respond to chemicals in the ways that other insects do. And so when you spray, you're really not even targeting them. You're just kind of polluting your yard or environment. So these are considered nuisance pests. They really don't have, there's no economic or bodily harm associated with them. I will say, just to touch on spiders, because I know that there can be sometimes emotional responses when it comes to these things. Spiders are one of those things that do not respond the same to all of the chemical treatments like permethrins. So it's not as effective, and it ends up just kind of like polluting your space. If you do wish to reduce the numbers of spiders in your home, you can just aim to reduce clutter. That's really the biggest thing. And then on spiders as well, here in Clackamas County, we have no medically significant spiders. And throughout the whole state, really the only medically significant one is the black widow, and there it's a very rare occurrence to have an interaction with that. If you have any questions on that, please reach out to me. Happy to answer.
All right, everybody. We want to thank you for being here and for doing your part. So we've got some little recap and just some final thoughts for you. So please, consider making that IPM plan or finding a company that can help you. That the IPM plan that Dakota discussed during the beginning. Remove those early detection, rapid response, noxious weeds. So a lot of the weeds that we talked about earlier, those are important weeds to get rid of right away. So your knotweed, your Italian arum, and your ivy, clematis, and your Himalayan blackberry, all of those. Hand pulling and digging is best. I know I wish there was some magic thing we could put on the weeds and they would go away, but really hand pulling to get them out just is the most effective way. And then, getting to know your pests, that'll help you treat them best. So figure out what you're treating and then target it specifically. So you're not just targeting anything and everything, because you can also harm the beneficial things. And then, with that in mind, avoiding the broad spectrum treatments and try to treat as targeted as possible. And then learn to live with those harmless ones. If you can handle the dandelions and the stink bugs, it'll be a lot easier for everybody, including yourself. Cut yourself some slack.
And one last plug for something that you can do as a Clackamas River Basin resident. You can take the pesticide free or wise pledge, and this will show your neighbors your commitment to keeping our water and environment clean. I can pop that in the chat, link to that pledge in the chat in a moment, and reach out again with any questions.